with that, we'll begin the interview. Howard, let's go back and talk about when you went into service. Were you drafted? Did you enlist? Where were you living at the time? Why did you join? And talk about that beginnings going into service.
Well, I was a senior in Harding High School, and when you reach the age of 18, you were automatically put in for the draft. You went to the principal's office and he signed you up for the draft. When I got out of high school in 1951, in 53, I was drafted into the service. I went into the service for a month or two, and I re-enlisted into the regular Army, and I was in for approximately 3 years, 9 months and 20 days, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Let's talk about your training. Where did you go first, and develop all the way through before you went to Korea?
The first place I went to was Fort Devens, Massachusetts. I was only there for a short time just to pick up uniforms and equipment, and they shipped us within 2 or 3 days to Fort Dix, New Jersey. I took basic training down there, and from there I went to Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, where I completed a photography school. From there I went to, they shipped me to Fort Lewis, Washington. I was there a very short time, not even a week, and next thing I knew I was on a boat heading for Korea. Went to Japan, landed in Yokohama, shipped me to Sasebo, Japan. From Sasebo, I went to Busan, Korea, and Korea. From Busan, I went north to my outfit, the 25th Infantry Division. I was assigned to the 25th Infantry Division Signal Company Photo Section.
So talk about your routine when you're in Korea. What's the daily routine?
Well, in the daily routine, you got up early, like 5:30 in the morning. We had tents. We slept in tents, and we had a mess tent. We went for breakfast, and then we went on our back to our photo sections, our different photo sections, and we had our daily assignments. Some was with PIO, Political Information Office. Some was tactical. Some was aerial. Some was I would say some was just maintenance of the photo section. We did have a photo lab, which was on a 2.5-ton truck. It was a portable photo lab, and we always had to maintain that with electricity. We had a portable generator to power it. We had to make sure it had enough water for our chemicals that we used to process our film. But that was our daily routine.
So were you in the actual part of processing, developing film?
Yes,
too?
we had a portable lab. We had two 2.5-ton trucks. One was, we called it an Antique 7. It was a portable lab. It had a small room for developing films, and it had another room for printing films. We had enlargers there. We made 8x10 pictures, and we had another truck that held a dryer that would dry our films and dry our prints.
Now, was this for aerial reconnaissance primarily?
No, it was for anything that was needed. Some was PIO, some was tactical. If we got calls to somebody needed some pictures taken, there were minefields that they were going to take these mines out of the minefields, and they wanted pictures of people there that were going to do this in case something went wrong. They would have documentation. We had to document everything that when they had the prisoner exchange, they sent photographers. I wasn't one of them that went, but they went up to Panmunjom when they had the prisoner exchange, and they were bringing prisoners, American prisoners across, and those were photographed for documentary purposes. The other things that we had, we did maintain a film library, and we had projectors that after the war ended in July, they did training for different units there, and we supplied training films.
Were you actually making films too?
No, we did not make any training films. They were already made at the 2nd Signal Platoon, Paramount Studios in Long Island City, and that's where the films were made. Later, when I left Korea, our whole company, our whole division went to Hawaii after the war, and that was our home base. I stayed in Hawaii for a while, and because I was regular Army, my time was almost up. They shipped me to the 2nd Signal Platoon in Long Island City, New York, Paramount Studios, where the training films were made. And I made a few films there while I was there, and then I was discharged. But that's where the films came from, and they were shipped to Korea, and company commanders would come in on a regular basis to pick up a film to show to their troops.
Let's go back to your routine. Now, you did aerial photography. Well, talk us through what it was like to get on whatever kind of plane you got on, and what you photographed, what you recall photographing.
Well,
and also, was there hostile fire? And if so, talk about that.
No, there was not. The war had ended. I got there, and I believe it was in August. The war ended at the end of July, so it ended in a couple of weeks. They were clearing minefields and stuff like that, and there was some stuff going on. It was still after the war. We did have air raids, and we did have what they called, we called them Bed Check Charlie, that used to come over at 4 o'clock in the morning in a small plane. It was like a biplane, an old World War I plane. And he used to fly over just to get under the radar, and they scrambled jets because they call an air raid. Everybody have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. It was just a harassing type thing. And he'd fly over and he'd throw a hand grenade out the side, and then he'd be gone. And they could never catch him because he's flying at 20 miles an hour and the jets are going at 600 miles an hour. They couldn't find this guy. But it was just a harassing thing. As far as the aerial stuff I didn't do too much in Korea. When we got to Hawaii, I did a lot more. We had I had to go to the hospital and get cleared for flight training. I had to get a physical for flight training, and because I was an aerial photographer at the time, they did. You got a little bit more money in the. You got $50 more a month in your pay. I did do a few jobs in Korea, but there was other people that did it also. But I did a lot more when we got to Hawaii.
And what kind of, were you in planes, helicopters?
I was in a Bell helicopter, and we had L-19s, what they called L-19s. They were Cessnas or Piper Cubs. In Hawaii, we photographed contingency plans because of the attack on Pearl Harbor at the time. The government, the military wanted contingency plans on where to evacuate people in case the islands ever got invaded again. And we would fly over the pineapple fields and sugarcane fields, photographing different areas that they could map and put on a map to evacuate people in case anything happened after, if the islands were ever attacked again. So I believe they still have those maps we supplied.
Go back to Korea for a minute. Where were you primarily stationed, in what area?
I was, first of all, we were about 40 miles north of the 38th parallel. And from there, they shipped us back once the parallel was maintained in the 38th parallel. We ended up about, it was called Tang Du Chini. Tang Du Chini, that was the name of, and that was about 50 miles north of Seoul, right outside of a small town called Uijeonbu. And that's where we were stationed.
Was there a lot of evidence of war there?
Yeah, oh yes, there was.
Like what?
There was minefields all around us. We had minefields, and we had a Turkish brigade that was stationed. It was stationed right on the other side of the minefield. At the time, we did not know that there was a minefield there. It was not clearly marked. And guys from our unit used to walk through those minefields to go to the Turkish brigade to get some of their food, because they had lamb, and they'd cook lamb good, but they would have all live animals there. They wouldn't have any canned food. They would have live animals, butcher the animals, and cook their own lamb, and it was really good. But after we found out there was a minefield there that we were walking through, and they came over and removed the mines. But there was evidence of war, because the town of Uijeonbu, there wasn't, people were living in huts, and there was rampant stealing of equipment from the army. They would come in at night and steal, they called them slicky boys, would steal everything that they could get their hands on. And you'd go there at night, and the town would be lit up. They would have electricity, because somebody stole a generator. They stole a generator from a British unit one time, and I remember a captain coming in there with a British Centurion tank, lined it up in front of the village there, with the tent city in the village, and he said, unless I get these generators back, this tank is going to go forward and just go on one side and come back on the other. And within a few minutes, the lights went out in that town, and the generator was sitting out in the middle of the road.
You were talking about the food a moment ago. Let's talk about what you ate, the meals and things that you had on a regular basis.
This was our menu for Christmas 1953. This is what they put together for Christmas dinner in 1953. It was turkey, mashed potatoes, the whole works, trimmings and everything. It was really good. The other thing we had, I remember that one day we had breakfast. I went to the NCO tent to have breakfast. I had 2 bowls of cereal, and when I was down at our photo lab, I noticed that guys were dropping left and right, and they had a 2.5-ton truck, and they were putting them in, and I said, what's going on? They said the milk was bad, they had food poisoning. And I says, you got to be kidding. I just had 2 bowls of cereal and I feel fine. I started to walk towards my tent. I didn't get more than 10 feet, and the next thing I knew, I was in a MASH hospital. I had completely passed out. And I was one of the group, and the whole company got food poisoning from that milk. And needless to say, the Inspector General was there the next day, I guess. I spent 2 days in the hospital, and they finally let us go, and the Inspector General came in and inspected our dining facilities, which was in a mess tent. Next to the mess tent, we had a meat locker with sawdust on the floor and block ice to keep the meat cold. And this was, I guess, in September. they opened the door, and inside the meat locker was one of our company dogs laying on the sawdust, cooling off, just laying there, sleeping in the middle of the thing. Well, they didn't pass inspection that day.
Now, you must have also had some forms of entertainment. First of all, did you go into town and did you interact with the people in the community in any way?
Very little. We didn't. They would come. The people would come to the perimeters of our company, and we had a woman that would come up with a sewing machine, a handheld sewing machine, and she would sew on patches and on your arm and your stripes. She would sew on that. We did have a Korean houseboy that we paid, our group paid for, and he would come in every day and sweep out our tent, and he'd do our laundry for us. But the interaction, people would come up and they would bring like these wooden foot lockers that they made. You could buy a foot locker. We had Army foot lockers, but these were just supplementals they let you have. And people would come to the perimeters of the company. We didn't go into town. There was nothing there anyway, so we didn't go into town at all. So very seldom. We would go after the war. We'd go out on photo shoots just to take pictures of the people and the surrounding areas, just for training.
But you never got any leave to go anywhere?
I did. After a while, I did have what they called R&R. I did go to Tokyo. We went to Tokyo for a week. They gave us a week off. They flew us to Tokyo, and we went to Camp Drake. They gave us new uniforms, put us on a bus, took us to Tokyo, and we spent the week. There was 3 of us that went, and you had to have so much time in Korea before you would have to get so many points that you could go on R&R. And we toured Tokyo, and they had what they call a Rocker 4 club. You could belong to that. We belonged to that, and you could go in and get a steak and a glass of milk and something that you never got, Coca-Cola in Korea. And they had the Gaijo Inn. They called it the Gaijo Inn in Tokyo. It was a nightclub. You could go up there and they'd have shows, and it was a nice time. You
remember the guys you went with?
Yeah, it was Fred Rossi. He was from New York, and Bob Corello was from Kensington, Connecticut. Bob Corello and I were, he was a good friend of mine up to 2 years ago when he passed away, and my wife and I had gone to his funeral. But we'd gotten together every year for years. Fred Rossi passed away. He worked for Eastman Kodak in New York, Rochester, New York, and he died in the parking lot after work, and they found him slumped over the front seat of his car.
Let's go back to, you went on leaves, you had different forms of entertainment. Did the USO ever come? Did you ever get visits from?
Yes, we did. We had a lot of USO shows, especially when the war ended. They decided to bring a lot of USO shows over there, and we saw Terry Moore. I photographed Terry Moore, and I photographed and met Marilyn Monroe. She came to Korea. I believe it was in December of '53. She was married to Joe DiMaggio at the time. She came to Korea with Lefty O'Doule's wife, who was a baseball man, and Lefty O'Doule and Joe DiMaggio stayed in Japan, and
put that down now.
Lefty O'Doule stayed in Japan with Joe DiMaggio, and Marilyn Monroe came to Korea and entertained the troops.
So your service time ended. Talk about how service time ended, where you were, coming home, and so forth.
Okay, I left our whole outfit, our whole division, the 25th Infantry Division. Their home base was Hawaii, Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. So they shipped the whole division out of Korea. Everybody went, everything, to Schofield Barracks. I stayed in Hawaii for a short time, and then they shipped me to the 2nd Signal Platoon in Long Island City, which was Paramount Studios, which was only about 50 miles from where my hometown was in Bridgeport at the time, and I could travel back and forth to go into Bridgeport. We made training films there, and I didn't do much in the 2nd Signal Platoon, except they'd go on these training films. They'd have it was a movie studio, Paramount Studios set, and we'd just go in there and watch them make the movies, and once in a while they'd say to us, you get into this movie here, and I made one movie, what to do, how to clean your rifle, and another one was to what to do in case of snake bite, and so forth and so on. And then after that, we went to I got discharged from Fort Hamilton, New York. I was going to go to helicopter school in Georgia, and when I went to Fort Hamilton to get discharged, the first sergeant said, you're going to be discharged on Thursday, and you're going to be re-enlisted, and you're going to go to the helicopter school, which I had signed up for, and if you pass that, you'll become a warrant officer. He said, you're getting discharged on a Thursday, so come back. I'll see you Thursday morning. So I got in my car and I went home. When I got back on Thursday morning, the captain in charge told me I was AWOL. He said I wasn't there. But the first sergeant mentioned to the captain, he said I had Baker on a special detail, and the captain didn't want to go against the first sergeant, so he stuck up for me. But he said, the captain started, he says, well, I'll make sure that he was giving me a hard time, to the point that I just got so mad, and I just said, forget it, I'm going to take my discharge and I'm out of here, I'm going home. He didn't like that. He said, your paperwork is in. I said, I didn't sign anything, and I'm out. I got out, I went home, and I was home about a month, and I got a call from the reserve unit, wanted to know why I didn't show up for a reserve, and I told them I was regular Army and I didn't have any reserve time, and that was the last I heard from them.
Talk about your communicating with your family during the time you're in the service, and also, was there anybody in your family who was in the service, and talk about that a little bit.
Yes, both of my brothers were in the service. My two younger brothers, my youngest brother was in the Navy. He was stationed aboard the Roosevelt, the aircraft carrier. And my other brother, Bob, was in the 1st Marine Division. He arrived in Korea also, and we were getting ready to leave Korea to go to Hawaii, and he was just getting there with the 1st Marine Division. And I was lucky enough to meet up with him, and I spent the day with him. I had lunch with him, and he stayed in Korea until he left he went to San Diego, and we had left for Hawaii. My younger brother stayed in the Navy, and he's put his 4 years in, and he got out also.
Okay, so we're getting toward the end now. Let's talk about your reunions. Have you been attending reunions, and if so, talk about that a little bit.
Yep. Our group, our photographers that we had motion picture photographers and still photographers. And there was only about 15 of us in the unit itself. It was a very small unit. But we kept in touch over the years. Around Christmas time, we would get Christmas cards from everybody. So we always kept in touch over the years. In 1999, most of the guys were all retired, and one of the fellows said, instead of sending a Christmas card, let's get together and have a reunion, which we did. Our first reunion was held in Washington, D.C. And this was the picture of the Washington, D.C. Reunion group. The Korean embassy at the time hosted a luncheon for us, which was very nice. Our wives and ever since then we had a reunion. This was our last reunion last year. We had gone to Tucson, Arizona. We've been to Tucson, we've been to Hawaii, we've been to Milwaukee, we've been to, I hosted one in Hartford, we've been to Florida, we've been Indiana, and we've had these reunions. This year we're going to Missouri. We will be in Missouri in October. Those are, and we still get together with the guys. So there's some had passed, but we still get together.
Well, also, were you? Was there an article in a newspaper that you were in?
Yes, we had on the Connecticut Post gave a. They wanted to interview some people, and they interviewed me and a few others from our VFW Post 9460 in Stratford, and it was published in the paper on just our experiences in the Korean War.
Well, as we bring this to a conclusion, talk a little bit about what did that experience, did it affect you, change your life? Talk about that a little bit.
Well, well, as you know, in the service, you're regimented. You're told what time to get up, what time to go to bed, what to do. You're regimented to the point your life is controlled. And when you leave the service, that stays with you to a point. It's not that you're regimented with your family or anything like that, but you have a respect for the regimentation. You have a respect for what is being done around you, and it should. I believe that the children today should spend at least a year in the service, in the military, to learn, just to see what it's like, just what it's like. It's not like being in jail or anything like that. That's not the regimentation I'm talking about. It's you have a respect of responsibility. Your responsibility in the service is to the fellow on your left and to the fellow on your right, and him in turn would be the same. So you rely on other people, and other people rely on you. So if people are relying on you, you have to have that respect for other people.
I know that you go to high schools and talk to youngsters. What is that experience like, and what do you think the students get out of that?
It's hard to say. I go every year to the high school along with other groups in Connecticut here, and we speak to the high school students, and I tell them to ask questions, because it's been 50 some odd years since I was in Korea, and you need something, a question sometimes will jog your memory into what you had forgotten, and you get the recall. A lot of students to this day, they do not know where Korea is or what it is. They just don't understand, but when they hear what you have to say, maybe they get a little better understanding on what's going on. It's hard to put a finger on it, but some of the students, they ask intelligent questions. Other students, they just don't know. I try to bring pictures to show them what it was like. They pass the pictures around, and I think when we finally leave, we finally put a question in their minds as what happened or what could happen. The mere fact that they're in high school, I told them when I was in high school, when I was a senior in high school, I was told to go to the principal's office to sign up for the draft. They did it right in high school. I said, you don't have that here. You don't have a draft here today. And to get into service today is not like it was when I went into service. You have to pass tests to get into service. They don't just take anybody. So I think they get a little bit more out of it after they leave than when they came in. I hope they did.
Well, Howie, that completes our interview. Unless is there anything else that you would like to add at this point in time?
Getting back to the school again, I mentioned the fact that in Japan, in their history books, Pearl Harbor never happened. And I try to, when we speak to the kids in school, we speak to their history classes. And we tell them, in Japan, Pearl Harbor never happened. It's not in their history books. Their history books are not open to the fact that Japan attacked Pearl Harbor. However, their history books are open to when the United States dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the mere fact that history is being eliminated by certain countries doesn't alter the fact that you, as history students in this country, know the true facts, what really happened. So history is subdued in certain countries, and it's not in ours. So be thankful that what you learn in this history class are facts.
Howie, thank you for your service to this country.
You're welcome.